Today we continue our journey around the NBA talking with fantasy analysts. I've got Kyle McKeown from Basketball Monster with me today. Let's go balls deep.
I could bet all of the riches that I ever had.
Welcome to another episode of the Balls Deep Fantasy Basketball Podcast. We are brought to you by Fantasy Basketball International. FBIbasketball.com is the website. At Adam King91 on Twitter is where you will find me. As I said, just rolling through our analyst interviews today, I've got Kyle McKeown from Basketball Monster. He's been kind enough to jump on with me. Kyle, good evening, sir.
Thanks for having me on, Adam. Good morning.
It is good morning. I slept in this morning. Normally I'm doing these podcasts at about 7 o'clock in the morning, but this is 9:30. This is quite dignified. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
So we're this is going to come out after the regular season, but we were just chatting about all the crap that's going on with some of the teams at the moment and the teams that are obviously just throwing in the towel when they might not necessarily have to throw in the towel. And I know for me it's frustrating and for you it's frustrating.
If you're a genuine fan and you're emotional and passionate about the sport, it's obnoxious to have players sitting out, especially, we know a lot of this happens at the end of the season, but when you've got teams that are still legitimately in contention for a play-in spot, resting guys, it seems, or it's tough to rationalize that as a fan to say, like, wait a minute, you actually have a chance. And granted, it might be like a 1 in a million Dumb and Dumber type thing, but we still want you to fight it out, right? To go to till the bell rings.
And it must be hard. Like, obviously you and Josh write your player notes over on Basketball Monster. It must be like, I know writing blurbs is hard as well. It's just hard to know what to write when you're writing an update on a player, because you don't actually know if they're going to play in the next game or what their role is going to be. It's so hard.
Oh, projections and just trying to broadcast what is going to happen in these games right now is, it's a complete crapshoot if you're just being honest about it. Like, you don't know who's going to play. Sometimes they're going out there with guys that, they might technically be a point guard or a distributor, but they haven't played with these guys well, so it's hard to discern how productive players are going to be in this situation too. It's definitely not a fun part of the season unless there are those couple of games that we can go to say, okay, this is having an effect on the standings, and we can draw some love out of this. Like that Clippers and Lakers game the other night was just, even though it wasn't necessarily a great game, it was still a lot of fun to watch just because it had implications this late in the season. And it forced the Lakers to play two of their key guys on back-to-backs. And that situation is something I want to know about, Adam. When you look at those situations where you've got these teams that have been resting guys on back-to-backs the whole season, or taking every opportunity possible that they can to take advantage of rest situations, and then they get to the end of the season where legitimately they don't want to be playing LeBron and Anthony Davis on back-to-backs right now because of workload issues and such. And plus, it's just, you have a less percentage chance to win that back-to-back game on the, all these kind of things. And so it just kind of makes me look back at earlier in the season and saying, how many games have you guys given up just because you were trying to be smart at the time?
Yeah, absolutely. You'd have to go back and obviously look at the schedule, but there'd have to be some games in there where they've sat them against the Pistons or against the Rockets. So games that they may have lost, there have been a number of upset wins. Play you guys, and then you can rest them in March and April. Kawhi Leonard, I think he probably could have played back-to-backs 2 months ago, but they chose not to, and then they lost Paul George, and now they're going to make the playoffs, but they could have got a top 4 seed potentially if they'd been smarter.
Just to kind of finish my thoughts on this whole thing, it's, everybody talks about an 82 game season is so long, but like the amount of court time these guys actually spend playing together in high impact moments where you're going to generate legit cohesion as a team, and that invisible chemistry that does play out for certain squads. It's is that just lost on some of these teams? Do they not believe in the impact of playing together and practicing? Because a lot of teams, their practices are the games.
They are, yeah. Look, I think one team that probably does get it is Orlando. Despite the fact that they rested everyone yesterday. It was a back-to-back. They're mathematically eliminated. But they're playing everyone today, I think. I know Fultz is not on the injury report. I only got up an hour ago, so I haven't had a good look.
They've got several of their main guys playing tonight. Boncaro and Wendell Carter are out, but they've still got Fultz playing. They got Cole Anthony playing. Jalen Suggs is playing, and Franz Wagner. And then that's those four starting tonight, which is a fun little lineup to see. And then they've got Patadze starting at center. So, which is, you do want to get a look at him in more high-level moments to see if he actually is an NBA rotation player that they can maybe count on for their bench next season.
Yeah. No, I've liked the fact that they've just kept rolling with most of their guys and haven't thrown it in until now. So we'll jump into, I guess, the questions, or the purpose of the podcast is just to find out a little bit about Kyle McKeown as a person, and so obviously I've said you work for Basketball Monster. You do a Bucks podcast as well. I think you've done. I've watched a couple episodes of that.
Yeah, that we just started that this year. Some friends of mine that I've done podcasts with in the past. Some buddies that I used to live in Wisconsin for 10 years in Madison, and went to tons of Bucks games, and became like my second team in many ways. And I was there for most of the Giannis years. And I remember when Giannis was a rookie, it's funny, I'd be the crazy basketball guy at the coffee shop in the morning telling all these Bucks fans, you wait, Giannis is going to win multiple championships for these Bucks teams. And they're all like, what, that skinny kid? And I'm like, you wait.
Yep, so, and you were right. Well, he hasn't won multiple yet, but
right,
that could still very well happen. They're probably the favorite. I think I don't do betting, so I'm not sure who the actual favorites are.
I mean, I would be interested to hear exactly who you think is legitimate contenders for the championship this season. I finally sat and talked with a friend about it the other day, and the only teams I really consider legit contenders, as long as injuries are good and all that, is the Celtics and the Bucks. And I'd probably take the Bucks still over the Celtics ultimately, but those two teams they're deep and they've got stars. They've got all the pieces you need to win a championship, whereas a lot of other teams have holes. Then they would be, I think, leaning more so on their stars than what even the Celtics and Bucks need to do.
Yeah, I think so. I think they'd be the two that jump out for me. Sixers, I'm like they need to prove it to me before I would have any faith. Like, I think if they can make the Eastern Conference Finals, then I guess that gives me a little more confidence in them. But yeah, I think it's Bucks and Celtics, and in the West, I don't know. I don't really see anyone getting over the Bucks or the Celtics. If I had to pick a team, I don't know. I still think the Warriors could do something with getting Wiggins back. They have played together enough that even though he's missed time, I don't think it'll take that long for him to get back into the flow of things. They are a little bit older, though, so that concerns me. The Grizzlies, I used to like the Grizzlies. I still sort of like the Grizzlies, but not like I did. They've just seemed to have annoyed a lot of people this season with all of their shenanigans that are going on. So, yeah, I think it's those two East teams for me as well.
Yeah, I can't really settle on any West teams that make me feel confident to be like, oh, they're as good as the Bucks and the Celtics. I don't see any of them over there. And I know a lot of people would want to argue the Suns because they added Durant, but where's the defense on that team?
Yeah, the Suns, I mean, I watched them last night against the Nuggets. That was, the second string Nuggets. And like, yeah, I mean, look, they can score, but they can't defend, and they don't have depth. They've got like they traded away. They obviously got Durant, but much like the Mavericks, they threw all these pieces in, and as we know with the Bucks and the Celtics, the reason that we do like them is because of their depth and their role players and who they've got coming off the bench. So yeah, poor Suns.
Yep.
Um,
Well, the name of the Bucks podcast is the Milwaukee Bucks podcast or the
yeah,
Bucks podcast. So you can just find that on Twitter. I forgot to say that earlier, so I just want to drop that in.
yeah, no, drop that in. So yeah, Basketball Monster is obviously where you are now. So the questions we've sort of been going in a bit of an order. So first question is, I guess, how did fantasy basketball writing, podcasting, analyzing come about for you? And is fantasy basketball what you do full time, or have you got another real job that gets in the way of fantasy?
No, I am lucky enough that so I was doing after school programming after I got done with college and went to college for like journalism, creative writing, history. And then as I was working in the after school programming, I was also starting to do fantasy writing as just an online intern with rotowire.com. My brother had started doing a little bit of writing for them, doing like game recaps at the end of the night. And you don't get paid at first when you're doing a lot of these little internship things. And but like once you establish that you're reliable, they'll start feeding you some money. And then you really I just kept raising my hand for things that I wanted to do and areas where I was passionate. And over the years, as opportunities opened up at RotoWire, I kept stepping into more and more responsibilities. Ended up being the NBA editor there at RotoWire for several years, started the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball podcast. That was like that was my baby this whole time that I've been in the fantasy sports industry, wanting to do that fantasy basketball podcast and hosting that for several years. And that's how Josh and I got introduced to each other. So that was really cool. And then from there, Josh ended up getting hired by Basketball Monster after we had worked together for a couple years at RotoWire, and Matt was there as well. Matt Smith from Basketball Monster, he was at RotoWire with us too. And then when Josh got hired over at Basketball Monster because of his great profile and awesome work that he does, he threw my name out there along with Matt to come with him and work with him over at Basketball Monster. So that was huge. And I mean, I was a Basketball Monster fan for years before I had ever worked there, because you go back and just look at the different people that Ken has always brought into that company. Like Ken built a beautiful, simplistic site in Basketball Monster, and then he went out and he got Matt Busser and Justin Fan, he founded Fantasy Labs, and now he's over at Underdog NBA as well. And like, it's just kind of cool to see how many big names in the industry have come through RotoWire, have passed through Basketball Monster. And then like, I think we have to give credit to Josh a lot for just kind of building the road for a lot of people who live internationally but are big fans of basketball to step up in this fantasy basketball space and to have profiles and to be, because there's just so many guys who have stepped up like yourself, Adam, who are passionate and do great work. And it is kind of amazing that so much of our really good fantasy basketball content comes from all over the world. It shows how international of a sport the NBA can be when it gets into everybody's hearts. As corny as that sounded.
No, look, I couldn't agree more. I mean, Josh got me into this as well. It was after. I mean, I got in a little bit later into fantasy basketball, but 10 years ago now, so mid-30s, and I just enjoyed doing it for the league that I was in, and I just thought this would be cool to do on a bigger scale. And who better to contact than Josh? He only lives not down the road from me, but I can get to him in a few hours. So I reached out to him, organised sort of a trip down to Melbourne where he is, caught up, had a few beers,
Wow.
had some lunch, and he just sort of gave me his story of how he started, and that was through RotoWire. And he said this would be a good way, contact these people. So I contacted RotoWire, and here I am. So yeah, it's Josh does a lot of good work, and Basketball Monster is obviously the go-to for a lot of people for their ranks and projections, and it's what a lot of us refer to when we say, is he a top 100 player? Is he a top 50 player? It's Basketball Monster rankings. So yeah, no, look, I couldn't speak highly enough of you guys at Basketball Monster and what you do. So and look, the fact that you get to do this full time, it's been a bit of a mixture so far with the people that I've spoken to. So some have jobs that they do outside of it, but for those that are lucky enough, like yourself, to be able to do it full time, I'm jealous. That's
it was my second and third job for years, and then I had to move to make it a full-time job thing too, as well, going into Madison and living there, and then just kind of poking my head in. And I have faith in yourself, and if you're passionate about something, do it, people. It's this is okay. So you want to know what I'm into these days? I got super spiritual a couple years ago. During the off season, I went through a guided mushroom trip meditation thing, and I got all like his hippie spiritual kind of.
Yeah.
And so now believe in good things for yourself. And there's only really one rule in this universe, and it's the golden rule. What energy you put out there comes back to you. So if you want to be working in this fantasy basketball industry, there are opportunities out there. You can fill them. Go do it. And then keep dreaming bigger and bigger as you go forward, raising your hand and speaking up for yourself, because there is definitely holes to fill for people to continue to expand the already really great community we've got out there of humble but hardworking fantasy experts. So yeah, come join the crew if you do have that passion.
It is a really good crew of people. I mean, you would know, like, everyone really works together in the fantasy basketball space. I think we promote each other's stuff. We jump on each other's shows. There's no real competition there. So that's what I really enjoy about it. And look, for me, I mean, maybe I'll look to increase my, I guess, commitment or the time that I put in. But I'm also in the lucky position that my full-time job, my day job, I love going to work every day. So I don't wake up and hate going to work. I'm driven to do it every day. So I'm really lucky in that space. I know a lot of people have a job that they don't necessarily love going to. So for me, that's a huge positive. Fantasy basketball obviously would take up a lot of your time. Outside of fantasy basketball, what sort of things do you like doing? Like, so hobbies, holidays, things like that?
I am a beach bum in the summer. So I live in Michigan, in Muskegon, Michigan, and we have, on the west side of Michigan, you have the only white sand dunes and freshwater sand dunes in the entire world. So we've got these beautiful white sand beaches, and I do a little bit of odd job work in the off season, but 7 days a week during the NBA season. So when it gets to be the summer, I try not to work too much, and then just kind of get by hanging out at the beach with my buddies, doing a lot of hiking. I lived out in Hawaii this last winter for the last 5 months, just got back. And that was the first time I'd been to Hawaii. And I fell in love with hiking out there. It was just like a new addiction for me. So that was beautiful. But man, as corny as it sounds and simple as it sounds, I love nature and the sun and the stars and the moon and stuff like that. So I just like going for walks, hikes, and hanging out at the beach when I'm not doing work stuff. I read a lot, but it's not of it's a lot for pleasure or necessarily. It's a lot of like weird spirituality books and junk about like meditation and
Yeah.
the benefits of taking ice baths and weird crap like that.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's interesting about the beach, because when you said you like going to the beach, and I mean, I don't know America super well, but I know where a lot of cities are, and I know Detroit and Michigan is not near a beach. Like it's not on a coast, so that's interesting that they have a beach there next to the
Beautiful
lake, I
beaches,
would
man.
assume. Yeah.
It's crazy. We have like legitimately some of the best sunsets in the entire world because of that view with
Mm,
Lake Michigan and everything. It looks like an ocean. So
yeah.
because it's so
Yeah.
big, so
Yeah. So TVs, movies, do you sort of have time for anything like that? You said you read a little bit, but do you actually watch much TV outside of basketball?
yeah. I mean, sitting on the computer all day for work, it's the games aren't on all the time, so I'm definitely streaming all kinds of movies in the background. Um, Loving The Mandalorian. Um, and I'm a big Marvel fan in most respects, so I'll watch all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I'm mostly into a lot of the mythology and superhero stuff, lighthearted things.
Yeah. Yeah.
I,
No, I think on the Marvel universe, what are your thoughts? Like, I know for me, it seems to have, because I'm quite a big Marvel fan as well, and I think it feels to me like it hit a high point and has slowly, I don't know if regressed is the right word, but they just set such lofty expectations with some of those sort of phase 3 movies that I don't know, it hasn't felt like it's reached those heights again for quite a while. Is that more a me thing, or is that a Marvel thing?
no, I mean part of it's just from everything being diluted. You can only reach that peak so many times in certain
Mm,
respects, like, and then you're only gonna get there's so many people whose opinions come into making a movie that it's more the exception, that you watch a
yeah.
movie and you're like, oh man, this was almost flawless, like I enjoyed everything about it, I got no
Mm,
complaints, which is Avengers Infinity War, Avengers Endgame.
yeah.
They did those perfect. So I mean, I still like a lot of the things they're doing with the Kang stuff. Kang
Mm,
seems like a great character that they're developing in a good way, but it's also just whenever you start doing things where you're diluting the uh the connection or the investment to two characters by doing the multiverse stuff or all the time travel things where it's like, who cares if somebody dies because there's another version of them in
yeah.
another, like, as soon as you start doing that stuff, even I grew up a comic book fan reading the comic books. There was a whole thing like when you involve clones and stuff like that, it just makes it all dumb because you could be getting got at any single time where it's like, oh, guess what? You thought I was the real guy, but I'm the
Yeah.
not the real guy. And it's just that kind of stuff where you're not you're tricking the audience instead of bringing them along for the, like, making them feel like they're in on it. And
Yeah.
like one of the recent Star Wars movie, they sent up a ship and it blew up, and Ray's yelling, Chewbacca, Chewie, you died. He didn't die, but they
Yeah.
wanted you to have that, and they're like, anyways, it was just dumb. It was one
Yeah.
of those things where it's like you're faking out anyways. You get what
Mm.
I'm saying?
No, I do. Yeah. No, I think if we're like I mean, with Marvel, Tony Stark dying was the obviously that was the sort of the culmination of a lot of things, but if that happened now, it would be like, well, it doesn't really matter because he's alive somewhere else. So we didn't have that aspect of it when he died. It came in after that, and yeah, that's a good point. Actually, I hadn't really sort of framed it that way in my mind, that we aren't as invested in the characters because we know that there's more of them out there. There's 3 Spider-Men. There's
Yeah.
multiple Spider-Men, but um, yeah. So now you said you're sort of by default you're a Bucks fan. So is your first team the Pistons?
Yeah. Yep. I
Uh,
grew up Pistons fan, living in Michigan, and then it's just 10 years spent in Madison at the time that Giannis had gotten drafted.
yeah.
It was hard not to have that kind of become my team because it was the team I could get in the car and go drive and watch. So.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. And other sports, so like a lot of analysts that I've spoken to sort of did a lot of fantasy football or fantasy baseball as well. For you, has it always been basketball and only basketball, or are there other sport interests?
It started out with fantasy football because that's the biggest one. I think that's what most people get started out with, and my brother's playing in that. Back in the day when you were drafting offline before Yahoo even had stuff to use, and then baseball. And the first time I played basketball, I think the first time I played baseball and basketball, I won those leagues, and then it just like planted a seed in me that okay, now I'm psycho about this, and then you start realizing how much better you are than a lot of the people that are playing, whether it's just because you're hustling all the time or because you're always looking at the news and checking. At back in those days, it was Roto World for the player news pages. But it's what was I even talking about?
Just about other sports that you like and how you and yeah, whether you've said you played other fantasy
Yep.
sports, so
And the first thing I wrote about in the fantasy industry was hockey. And I
oh,
was not a
okay.
hockey fan at the time, but that's what they needed. That's what Roto Wire needed coverage on at the time.
Yep.
And it was like, okay, if I take this on, then I can probably get a basketball team as soon as a basketball team opens. And then, like, of course, a week later, I'm writing for the Sixers or whatever, and which was great. But then when I became the NBA editor at RotoWire, I just knew that like there was no more time to spend on baseball, which I was writing baseball articles at that time as well, because it just felt to me like this is when you get to a certain point where you're working full time as an NBA analyst, and I just felt like I was anytime that I was spending on another sport, I should have been spending on basketball to understand that better or to curate the content better on RotoWire or whatever it might be. And I just kind of fallen out of playing most other fantasy sports. I still have a hometown fantasy football league that, I mean, it's offensive the fact that I'll win this thing sometimes, but it's cool because we've got a championship belt that we like engrave your name on and whatnot. And
Yeah.
there's no way my name should be on there twice, but
Oh,
yeah.
there you go. There you go. Give out that positive energy, and you're getting it. You're getting it
There you
back.
go. I
There
am
you
a
go.
winner.
Yep. So the final question I've been chatting with people about is Victor Wembanyama for next season, and it's at this stage, obviously we don't know where he's going. We don't know who he's going to be playing with. We know he's going to go number one, but it's a two-part question, and we'll see if your answers line up with pretty much everyone else. The first part is, where would you be comfortable drafting him next season based on what we know now? And the second part of the question is, what do you think his ADP will be? So where will that line up with where you want to take him, or is that going to be higher or lower?
Even in the very first drafts next year, I kind of doubt that he's going to be going later than like the third or fourth round because people are going to get so hyped about him. I would, I might start looking at him there, but there's also some of the projections might come out, and he might look like a first or second round player. So it's that's going to be hard. That's going to be a tough call because you don't want to be. Oof. You know what? There might be a point where I end up talking myself into him at like the end of the second round or something like that.
Yeah.
But he's gonna get hyped up, and he's gonna go at a decent spot, and I think in many ways it's gonna be justified. But man, I it's like the older I get, the less and less risk I want, and a rookie is just as much as we have high expectations for Wembanyama, he's still a rookie. There's still unknowns about exactly how durable he's going to be, and and how he'll be used.
Yeah, that's right. Look, I think most people that I've spoken with, everyone probably have said I'd like to get him third or fourth round. So for me, it's sort of around pick 40, 35, 40. But I have a feeling that, yeah, as you said, that hype is going to be real and it's going to be big. And I think he's going to be hyped up to the point where he's probably going in the second round in a lot of leagues. And there'll be people that will take him in the first round. There's going to be
Mm-hmm.
people that will take him at pick 11 or pick 12, and then try and pair him with sort of a surefire thing like a Damian Lillard or someone who's sort of going to play 70 games probably and has a really high floor. So, yeah, I think for me, he's probably going to go ahead of where I'm comfortable taking him. So I'll probably just go in as many draft only leagues as I can until I finally get him. So, because I want to have him somewhere on our team, just because I think he's going to be super fun. But for you, there's obviously three. Well, I mean, there's multiple landing spots, but there's three that are ahead of the rest: the Rockets, Spurs, and the Pistons. Have you got a preference personally as to where he goes next season?
Anywhere but the Spurs is my first option. I haven't. I don't like the way the Spurs run their team. It's obnoxious to me as a fan. I they, yeah. I don't. I must be the least Greg Popovich fan,
Mm,
probably out of anybody. And it's honestly just because the last few years with all the weirdness that started happening with Kawhi, and when they moved into being more of like a kind of a tank situation, it's it's just been frustrating to watch their rotations throughout the season, the last couple seasons. The way Derek White was always marginalized on this team
mm,
at a time when I felt like when you had DeJounte Murray, Derek White, Jakob Pertl, and then like Devin Vassell, they just there's certain players that they were always marginalizing at times in the last couple seasons where I didn't get it. Like we've
mm.
all now that Derek White's on a good team playing in this bigger spotlight, people are finally seeing like how important he is in his role
Yeah.
and everything. So anyways, it's not a fan of the Spurs. Don't want Wembanyama going there. As a Pistons fan, that would be great. And that would be a super interesting pairing with him and Jalen Duren going forward, like Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey. That's pretty solid. And
Mm,
the Rockets, I would like him on the Rockets just because there's a bunch of other young guys there, and it would be fun to watch in some respects, especially if they have more structure next year with a
yeah.
new coach. But so something that annoyed me this year about the Rockets is the fact that they looked at Jabari Smith and they say this guy can play power forward and he can play center, but we're not going to use him at small forward. And I'm just kind of sitting there thinking like, you're not. Silas wasn't necessarily in love with Sengun. So, and if you're looking at your team and you're saying we're angling ourselves to potentially add Victor Wembanyama to the team next year,
Yeah.
shouldn't you have been looking at situations where you were either playing uh, Sengun at power forward and asking him to expand his 3-point shooting more, and then maybe even playing why can I not think of their backup center right now? Garuba,
Oh,
playing
Garuba,
him
yeah.
more because Garuba's like a legit defensive impact player
Mm,
who could be starting on the right team next to the right player. And so I've been disenchanted with how the Rockets have kind of got all this great talent, but not necessarily used it in ways that
yeah.
seem logical. The lack of Tari Eason not playing, getting like many starts this year just doesn't make sense either to me. So
Yeah. Yep. No, yeah, look, I agree. I think in terms of talent and the young pieces, I like Detroit and I like Houston because they have, but their the way their teams are run and their minutes distribution that worries me a little bit. Um, yeah, I mean I'm pretty high on Shengun and he hasn't got. I mean he gets the minutes, but I mean, Josh goes on about this all the time, but it annoys me when they get players off the court when they're in foul trouble. How for a team like Houston where wins don't matter, and you want to be teaching your young guys to play with fouls because you are projecting 5 years we want to be a competitive team, and if we're in a playoff series and Şengün is our center and he's got 4 fouls in the first 2 quarters, you need him on there. If he's your starting center, you need him on there, and if he's never had that opportunity, so that really frustrates me. So, but yeah, the Spurs, I don't know. I I'm not super high on Pop either. I do think in terms of development, the Spurs are okay at developing players. But as you said, with Derek White, he was just not used correctly. And look what he's doing now in Boston. Like he's a key piece for their team. Whether he's starting, well, I think he sort of has secured a starting spot now,
Yeah.
which at the start of the season that was not on the cards really. He was a sixth man, seventh man even behind Brogdon. But he's been so good that they just need him on the court. So no, it's going to be interesting to see who takes him and how he's utilized.
And there's teams that I can like. If you talk about the Hornets, yeah, I would like the idea of him playing with LaMelo, and
Yeah,
also just to give LaMelo more support. Talk about the Blazers. I would like him to his fit with the Blazers in a lot of respects, but I don't necessarily love those two organizations right now, and that's like kind of going down the road. I'm not in love. Like I hated the way the Pacers ended this season. They still could have been fighting for a play-in spot, and they just mailed it in. That annoys me to no end. I would actually love Wemby to end up with the Magic because that's their whole thing, and they might play him at point guard or something stupid like that. And I know that's a joke, but some of these teams, if they take Wembanyama, they should be looking at situations where he might kind of be like, it's you really are almost going positionless with a cat like this, where you're like,
yeah.
we're just gonna put him on the court with other dudes, and it's gonna be fine. So we don't need to worry about what position he is because he can help protect the rim. He can bring the ball up the court to help us with that a little bit. He can do everything, and he can shoot, so he's not gonna be making the court smaller, all these kind of things.
Yeah, look, I mean, if we look at his game now, I think probably the one, well, not a flaw, but he's got a lot of strengths, but probably passing is something he hasn't demonstrated as much as obviously his shot blocking and his 3-pointers, that sort of thing. But just given his height and I think his IQ and the opportunities he's going to be given, whoever drafts him, they need to be running the offense through him. I think that's something that a little bit like Karl Anthony Towns. His passing game has improved over the course of his career. Jokic has always been a good passer, but he's a freak. So yeah, personally, the Magic, that would be ideal. I think if he landed there somehow, I don't think it's going to happen, but I would love him on the Magic because I just think that they're heading in the right direction.
Man, they would probably start Fultz, Wagner, Boncaro, Wemby, and Carter. Would they really do that?
Probably.
Oh
I
my
don't
gosh.
know. I know that would be, and then having Cole Anthony coming off the bench.
Jalen Suggs.
Yeah, Jalen Suggs off the bench.
Yeah.
You've still got, I think Mo Wagner has been pretty good this season
He's
as a
solid.
backup. Badadze, as you said, he's starting today, so who knows what his role is. But
and Gary Harris is still signed to the team through next year, I believe, as well. So
yeah, he probably is. Yeah, so that would be really fun. I don't see it happening, but I'd love it to happen. So, yeah. Anyway, so that will look that's probably enough from both of us for today. Yeah. So off season obviously coming up. It's probably be the off season when this is released. That's obvious. You've already said that's your downtime. It's when you can scale back a little bit and do some other things. But what will you have anything coming out during the off season at all?
Yeah, I'm gonna be doing a Bucks podcast tonight. So find the Bucks podcast on Twitter, or come find me at RotoKyleNBA on Twitter, and I will retweet the live stream as we're doing that later. after the Bucks game, and that's about it for me right now. It's just finishing up Basketball Monster work for the next couple days, and then it is playoffs and just Bucks playoffs podcasts. And if you follow me on Instagram, you'll see a bunch of beach pictures all summer.
Sounds good. All right. Excellent. Thank you for coming on. That will do it for today's show. Remember, check out all of our content. Our Discord server is still running pretty wild over there. We're up to about 2,500 people. FBIbasketball.com is where you'll find all of those details. My player ranks will be out when this comes out for next season. Stupidly early, but why not? Our podcast, you can follow this on Spotify, Google, Apple Podcasts. Give us a thumbs up, subscribe to YouTube. Until next time, catch up.
You just listened to another episode from the Fantasy Basketball International Podcast Network. Thanks for joining us. And for more information about joining our community, please check out our website at fbibasketball.com.